adventurers, and welcome to the Micflayers podcast, coming to you today from a castle hidden in the depths of a German forest with an assistant whose name is surely Igor. My name is Martin O'Dwyer, and I will be your host for today's episode, and joining me, as always, is your host, Conor O'Brien. How are we doing today, Conor?
It took me a second to realize where you were going with it, and then when you were like, he's has an assistant and his name's Igor, I'm like, oh, we're building monsters. Yeah. I'm doing well, buddy. How are you?
I'm good. And as you mentioned, today we're going to talk about Homebrew Monsters, which will be a lot of fun because Conor has made some nasty. Oh, I shouldn't have sworn. Damn it.
I'll bleep it. Oh, we're 35 seconds in. I'll bleep it.
I'm sorry.
I'm making a note now.
Okay, yeah, but aside from me making more work from you, been a good week in the world of D&D. Lots of exciting things happening. Apparently, we got our first proper, well, not proper look, but kind of proper trailer, I suppose, for the Tal'Dorei Reborn, or is it Exandria? It's Tal'Dorei Reborn campaign setting.
It's Tal'Dorei Reborn, yeah.
That is coming out in, what is it? It's coming out on the 18th, isn't it?
So by the time this podcast airs, it'll be out.
Yeah, so it's coming out in 2 days at the time of recording, which is very, very exciting. Hilariously, because of a page they put in the... Do you know the way they do the things with this is pages from the book with the art and all this stuff, and it's oh, that's really cool. So, because of course, Critical Role fans are pretty dedicated. It happens when you regularly watch a Lord of the Rings film every week. For a live stream. But because they posted a page, and one of the things they listed was a new subclass, the Moon Cleric. Mm-hmm. And because they showed the page with the art for the Moon Cleric, Critters and other D&D people just went open image in new tab, zoom, and line by line decoded the class to the point where the channel is Wintry D&D, but it's that guy I mentioned before, the Wintry Wyvern. He has a full video on exactly what the class can do. It's really cool. I'm really excited to see it. It's got some really cool channel divinities and other stuff. It's got a channel divinity that lets you focus on concentrate on two spells at once, but they have to be spells from your cleric spell list, from your domain spells. But they get really good domain spells. They get Fairy Fire, Hypnotic Pattern, Hallucinatory Terrain, Moonbeam. They greater invisibility as well. They get.
I do have a thing. That could be a very cool thing. I'm seriously looking forward to the book. I mentioned before, I'm a huge fan of the original Tal'Dorei book. I still think it's one of the best books that's been released. It's really comprehensive in terms of all the places you can go, and there's a handful of subclasses which are quite interesting in it. There's monsters, there's magic items, it's all great. I'm super excited for this, and the Domain of the Moon Cleric.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. There's the Moon Domain Cleric, and then there's also a Blood. Is there a... No, it's not the... Is it... No, there's a...
There was a Blood Domain Cleric in the original. I think that's going to be included in this one as well.
Yeah, I think... But I remember when I was reading through the big list of, this is the subclasses and stuff that we have in there. One of them was a Blood Wizard.
That sounds really awesome.
Yeah.
That's... proper blood mage stuff.
Yeah.
But about the Order of the Moon, the Moon Domain Cleric, that I'm actually looking forward to seeing, because I think that might fit very nicely into my homebrew world, because the elves are from the moon in my world, and they do worship the goddess Ashilva, and she's represented by the moon and stuff. So I think that could be a super cool class for elves to play in my world.
Remind me, there's 2 moons in this world as well, in Asteria, isn't there?
There is 2. There is one is visible at night, which is the Feywild moon, and with this kind of pinky hue, and then the other one is a dark recess or void in the sky, which is a Shadowfell, which is only visible in the day.
Oh no, that's perfect, because from there, because I watched that Wintry D&D video about the Moon Cleric, and all of its channel divinities, it's a Moon Cleric, and its abilities are split between the 2 moons of Exandria. Of I think it's Ruidus, and Ruidus is the red moon, and the bigger one I can't remember right now. But there's... Sorry, what?
There's loads of there's loads of fan theories out there, because Matt has been named all the second campaign. Matt was name dropping those 2 moons regularly, and people are convinced that he has some planescape or some outer realm style stuff planned that involves the moons, like maybe in a Dead Space style thing where one of the moons is like a living organism or something like that. There's loads of theories out there that the moons have play some big part in something Matt would like to do at some point.
It really wouldn't surprise me because like it's not a huge spoiler, but like based on the early level channel divinity you have for the Moon Cleric, you've two options. There's one that's called like it's something of the Watchful Moon, and then there's another one that's like something of the Blood Red Moon.
That's cool.
Or the Blood Moon, sorry, is what it's called. And the Watchful one, what that does, because in Exandria, the bigger of the moon, the curse of lycanthropy follows its cycles rather than Ruidus. So if when you use your channel divinity, you can use that channel divinity to empower an ally with some of the powers of lycanthropy, and one of them it doesn't like change them or anything, but like the Watchful one, I think it gives them like advantage on attack rolls and like 10 feet extra speed, and then the Blood Red Moon one, I think if I remember right, because I've only watched the video once, it gives you like I think it's sort of like the Wolf Totem Barbarians rage ability where you give advantage to it's pack tactics basically.
Oh, it's pack tactics, yeah.
It's quite similar to that, I think, where if you're a certain amount of allies within a certain range, you can give them all advantage on attack rolls. With your channel divinity, I think they might do a little bit extra damage as well. Like I said, it's all I haven't super gone into it, but that's really awesome. We've also got Call of the Netherdeep from Critical Role coming up later in the year. I think that's around March.
February. Is it February? It's March. I think it's actually March, right? Yeah.
I think it's around March. And in what are we?
January.
12 days. In 12 days' time, the animated series for Critical Role premieres, which I'm very excited about.
That's the thing I was thinking. I'm like, there's something else coming up soon. Yeah. That's due out. That's on Prime, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, it is indeed. I'm very excited and very happy to have Prime. I think it could be cool actually if we did like maybe like a sort of like we did for when Critical Role Campaign 2 premiered. Maybe we do like an episode on like an episode of our own on like episode 1 of The Legend of Vox Machina, because they did mention that the first 2 episodes won't be based on campaign stories that were live streams. They're based on they're to set up the world and sort of
because they're where they're coming in terms of the campaign story is very much like middle of the road. They're like meant to be like levels 8 or 10 or something like that, so it's very middle of the road, and these people have been traveling together for a while and doing adventures, so you need to introduce the characters and stuff for people who maybe are not Critical Role fans who are stumbling upon this.
And that's totally fair, because when I started with Critical Role, I started at the first episode of Critical Role, which is like halfway through their Craghammer arc, and I remember being very confused but still enjoying myself.
I mean, honestly, I have such good memories of the early stuff in Critical Role. And I occasionally I'll go back and just pull a random episode from the Craghammer stuff or from the Briarwood arc or anything like that, or when they went to with the Slayer's Take and stuff like that in Vasselheim, and I'll just pull a random episode and I'm like, this was good. This is good viewing. You know, I really enjoyed this, and it's just going to show us how far the show has come, but just also like, it was still so solid then, even if the quality of the camera work and stuff was less. It's still so good even back then.
Even having to put up with Orion Akaba,
we're going there.
Oh man, I must link you a video by this guy called Many Kudos. It's called The Many Controversies of D&D, and number 1 is Orion Akaba on Critical Role.
Oh, there's actually, if we're gonna get into the
we're going way off topic here, but it's
we're going way off topic because we won't. There's other controversies we could get into.
That could be a fun episode. That could be a fun episode of Micflayers.
That could be a minefield of an episode.
That could be that could be an episode we record that turns into a lost episode.
Whoops! My finger slipped onto the delete button. But there might actually, depending on where we go in this conversation about monsters and stuff, there may actually be another one, D&D controversy I bring up that is somewhat pertinent. Pertinent, that's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
No,
we'll see.
You've got me intrigued now. I really hope it does come up. But Matt Mercer, he's a man who is well known for his homebrew. He's made he's the vestige items. He's got multiple subclasses between like Cobalt Soul, the Blood Cleric that we already mentioned, the Gunslinger, which is so much fun. And he's also made a lot of really, really cool homebrew monsters in the past. Off the top of my head, spoilers for very, very late into campaign 2, but like final form Mollymock.
Yeah, yeah. My actually, when you and this, it's funny because I don't think I've thought about this monster in so long. I did a quick like run through my brain there, like brain searching and analyzing, and thinking of which monsters I can remember from all the times he's done. He did one in like very very early campaign 1 where they were going through the Underdark trying to find out what was happening in the mines and stuff like that. And they went into this chamber where the entire floor was littered with tiny fragments of bone.
Oh my god!
And
yes.
There was some tentacly, like gaunt-looking humanoid creature that like came out of the darkness and they had to fight and stuff. And I remember I remember everyone being like, "What is this?" I don't think it was. It was definitely homebrew. I don't think it was anything from the books.
Yeah,
I think Matt came up with this, but it was proper like cosmic horror level stuff. Like it was wacky and bizarre. But yeah, no, Matt's done some great some really great monsters and stuff like that. More recently in campaign 2, he had this horrific giant baby, like cherub faced baby. It's like the baby's face on like a almost on like a rhino's body or something like that, and it was in one of the ruins they went into, and it like.
Oh, I thought that was an Ashapal.
I think it was kind of maybe similar to in the sense that I think it had an umbilical it was dragging behind it and stuff like that, which is super gross.
Yeah.
A
very white monster, that one.
Yes, a very so yeah, no, he has a great history of doing some really really unique monsters, or even just tweaking monsters. Like honestly, homebrew monsters don't always need to be. And here's my first golden tip of this episode. Homebrew monsters do not always need to be from the ground up monsters. You can absolutely go. You can pull any monster you like from the monster manual or any other book and go, I like this, but what if it had blank? And then just go from there.
Yeah, I really like that. It sort of reminds me of when I used to play like Lord of the Rings wargaming, and like if you wanted to make like you would have like 30 Orokai in a box or something like that, and that's like your set of Orokai. But like if you wanted to make one like an Orokai leader or like a captain, you could like clip different things off and like kit bash a bit and like use green stuff and stick things on. What I did was I also had because I had an evil army. I also had the set where it was, I don't know what part of the movie it was meant to be from, but it was a set that had like fully re-embodied Sauron with the mace up over his head, and Sam and Frodo like lying on the ground cowering away from him. And at the time I wasn't playing a good army, and I can't remember if the hobbits were any good, but the hero hobbits probably would. Heroes always had special abilities, but because I wasn't playing a good army at the time, I just took my snips, decapitated Frodo, and used green stuff to stick his. I had an Orokai that had a sword up like this. So snip the sword here and here, so it was just his hand like that up in the air, and then like green stuffed Frodo's head here, so he was like an Orokai with Frodo's head raised into the air. And I think that's a really fun way to look at also homebrewing monsters, where the base thing is really cool. You might just want to change one or two small things to make it your own, like you just said.
Oh yeah, I mean, like you can make any monster. Right, man. I'm still getting over this bloody cough. You can make any monster genuinely interesting just by changing like one thing. Like for example, take like I don't know, a Manticore, right? And then make its bite attack have like an extra D4 fire damage. And then just say its main is made of fire when you encounter it, and if you hit it with a melee attack, you take 2 points of fire damage. And there you go, you have a flaming Manticore, which is already a homebrew monster. It's familiar, but like seasoned players will be like, that's a Manticore, but not like any Manticore I've seen. And the fire damage will be a whole extra aspect to it, and the flaming mane of fire around their face will really kind of evoke new intrigue and stuff. It's so easy just to throw throw two monsters together, or just add an element type is a really simple but interesting way of making a monster really really interesting.
There's a really fun homebrew that I found. This is literally going back probably like 2 years ago now. I can't remember. I don't have it. I didn't save it because it was before we had to go run virtually. So I just had the thing pulled up on my laptop screen as I was DMing. But I think they were either called the dried ones or the desiccated ones. and they were basically desert dwelling undead, and rather than being like your traditional looking zombie, they looked more like mummified corpses. They're like undead, where like all the moisture has been sucked out of them, and like they're like they've like they're literally just skeletons covered in skin, and they have these big long claws. And I think they did something, I can't remember exactly, but I think they had something to do with when they made an attack. I think you could either take exhaustion if you failed. It was like a DC 12 save, so it was a really low save. You were almost guaranteed to pass it, but if you had a few bad rolls, you could end up in a bad situation. I think it was either exhaustion or some other like additional effect, but that's literally just like a zombie that you've just changed the aesthetics of and added like a tiny little difference in like the actual stat block. They weren't, from what I remember, they weren't more, like, I'll put it this way, I used like 6 of them in an easy fight for my party at that time. So they're not like super strong, but they're just fun, and they're weird, and they're different, and my players got very creeped out by these like skin zombies coming towards them.
Yeah, I think it's actually, if I'm not mistaken, there's something not too dissimilar in one of the Tome of Beasts books. It's the Tome of Beasts or Creature Codex, but it's one of those Kobold Press books, and I think it's called. Don't quote me on this, I'm probably wrong. I think it's called something like a Thirster or something like that, but it sounds way different.
Looking through the Tome of Beasts, Thirster, Thought.
Thirster, Thought, Simp.
Oh god! And then it's like a stat block with minions, and a boss monster goes Thirster, Thought, Simp, Belle Delphine.
The Simp one is a creature that is automatically charmed by you when it comes in contact with you.
She throws jars of her bath water at you as a ranged attack.
Yeah, it just eats your gold instead of doing damage.
Yeah, it eats your gold and uses it to heal the boss monster.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Oh, God. Sorry, I've entirely lost the plot of what we were talking about there.
We were talking about Homebrew Monsters,
yes, sorry,
Matt Mercer.
The desiccated ones and the dry ones. I still think probably my favourite homebrew I've seen Mercer do is the final form Mollymock, where he's got all of the eyes of the Sum Novum around, and then I loved how he did it, where he put in the mechanic where if the players really pressed him and tried to have him remember Mollymock rather than Lucian or the Nonagon, and trying to pull at that part of his soul that they thought still had some measure of influence over the character, and then whatever they did, then they had to make it I think it was usually a mental stat check based on whatever way they approached that thing. So I think if I remember rightly, I think Yasha got really mad at him, and I think she made an intimidation check or something. But if they passed the check, one of the eyes of the Sum Novum, he would lose reactions. Or legendary actions, sorry. He would lose legendary actions.
Yes, that's right.
And then he wouldn't be able to activate some of the eyes of the Sum Novum around him. And then there was it was really cool where if one of them got targeted by the eyes and they failed to save, an eye would appear on their body, and then for each eye they had on their body, they would have a -1 to their saving throws.
Yes, and I think it also gives them some beneficial things as well, but in the kind of in the sense of you're being brought into the fold of these aberration creatures. So you're gaining new abilities, but you're slowly losing yourself in the process.
I just thought it was very, very cool, and in particular, the map he set up for it was really sick. Conor, why do you use Homebrew Monsters?
Usually I'll homebrew something if I can't find something that suits in the handbook, in the player's handbook, well, not player's handbook, but the monster manual or anything else. If I'm looking to do an arc and I'm cool, what will I do? Maybe I know, for example, that if you go to this region, I'm okay, I know this place is full of elementals. It's specifically volcanic, so they're going to be fire or earth or magma or something like that. And then I'll go and I'll look and I'll see what kind of fire elementals do we have. And if I see that we have maybe ones that are in a low kind of a low challenge rating, and then ones that are in a really high challenge rating, but nothing in the middle, and the middle is kind of what I need for this encounter, I'll find something else and I'll tweak it to make it work. Then I might take maybe I could take an air elemental and just change its damage type or something like that, and be like, oh, instead of a swirling mass of air, it's a swirling mass of flame. And it's the right level I need for in terms of power rating and stuff like that. That I can put you guys up against it, and it doesn't. Sometimes I'll often. I typically homebrew monsters more so for big fights or maybe specific things in the world. Um, I'll like if I know there's a big bad, I'll oftentimes want them to have a very specific stat block based on what I know they can do in the world and stuff like that. If there are if it's just an encounter you guys are experiencing along the road or something like that, I usually won't go to the trouble of homebrewing it. Because I'm like, this is a one-off battle that doesn't necessarily mean a huge amount. But if I'm like, this is the boss of this arc, or this is a recurring character that will come back up more often, I'll take the time to homebrew them because I know that they'll factor in more later on. Presumably, unless you guys just like massacre that monster in an instant, and I'm like, oh, those 3 extra fights you were gonna do with them as you got further up the mountain now don't matter. So and it does happen, but
just reaching for the pen, like, no, that's not happening anymore.
Lift up the sheet and just tear it in half, and but yeah, no, that's primarily why I'll use homebrew stuff. Also, like sometimes you just want to hit a certain vibe, and particularly I often do when it comes to scary things as well, because I'm like, you guys fought a beholder in this campaign we just played. That was a fairly, I homebrewed him a little bit. I tweaked a few things in his stat block, and if you look at the beholders as they appear in Volo's guide, it actually gives you a bunch of additional eye ray effects that he can do. Pardon me. And yeah, so I knew, I think it's sometimes your players are they know the game too well. You're a DM, so you know loads about the game, and you've seen most of the monsters because you do what I do every single week. You sit down to plan the session. Well, not every week. But you sit down, you go to plan a session, and you go, cool, here's the monster manual. Boom, let's go through this and see what I can fight this week. And you've probably looked, like, realistically, you've probably gone cover to cover in the monster manual a few dozen times, if not over 100 times. And I would have done the same.
I wouldn't necessarily say cover to cover, because I try not to do a whole bunch of that, because I don't want to spoil myself as a player as well as a DM. If I'm looking for monsters for D&D, I usually only look in the area that I'm currently working in. So I know a ton about Giantkin because the last 2 arcs I've ran are related to giants. Like Dire Trolls are class. I haven't used one yet, but they're so cool.
Yeah, but yeah, I'll do that because I'm like, particularly if you guys have faced it before in a different campaign, I'll try to just rejig the monster so it has some extra ability you didn't see before. It's like, oh, you fought griffins before. This griffin spits acid or something, like, or this or maybe this griffin is immune to damage that is non-magical. So all of a sudden you go in thinking, yeah, well, hack up this griffin, no problem. But then you're like, no, this is a royal griffin, and they're a particular breed of griffin that are immune to non-magical attacks. And I'll throw a little wrench in the works just to kind of keep you guys on your toes and stuff. It keeps the fight interesting, and particularly for seasoned players, like, it keeps things it keeps you on your toes and keeps you guessing. Like,
I had a terrible idea while you were talking here. A griffin that can speak, and you have to make a wisdom save every time if you start your turn within 10 feet, because it just continually spouts Family Guy quotes.
Oh, griffin. Oh, okay, yeah. That is a terrible idea. Don't do that.
It's like a really, really, really bad Jabberwock.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, that's good. I'm sort of in the same boat. It's a lot of the time for like thematic reasons, where like the monster manual and subsequent books of bestiaries, they cover a lot and they hit a lot of notes. But if, like you're saying, if you're looking for something like really specific, and something like with maybe more lore ties to your world, like if its character is meant to be deeply based in your world, you I think a lot of the time, unless you take that next step to homebrew, even if it is only changing 1 or 2 small things about it, you can really, really nail the concept if you just add in like 1 or 2 small things. Like most of the homebrewing I've done, aside from, let me see here, yeah, I've 3 written down there. Most of the homebrewing I've done has been that just small change stuff. I think like the biggest one I did was for a boss battle a while back, and like, we can talk about some of those later, because I think that one I'm talking about might actually be my favorite homebrew I've made, in terms of like a monster, even though it's literally just based on like another monster that's available that's a little bit more right out. So if you're, let's say you want to make like a particularly interesting monster, what's something like you might either look out for in like a good homebrew, if you're like looking through maybe like Unearthed Arcana, or like one of the other DM subreddits where people will post like homebrew monster creations, or I think r/homebrew is one thing as well. Like what's things you look out for, and it probably can include stuff like the Tome of Beasts in this as well. What stuff you look out for was like either like something that's like a gold star for something, or like a red flag.
Okay. That's a good question, actually. I think when I'm thinking of monsters, I don't like sit down and go, today I'm going to come up with a monster. I usually actually like most things with my D&D inspiration. I keep my phone on me, obviously, because it's 2022, and who doesn't? But I keep my phone on me, and if I'm sitting down and I'm watching something, occasionally I'll come across a documentary on YouTube, or I'm like, that's an interesting animal, or that's whatever. I'll take note of it, and I'm like, that could be a really cool monster. If you actually have, the reason I was looking down a second ago is because I was getting the note open on my phone. Sometimes I do things that are like they're specifically monsters, and I'm like, I'm definitely going to homebrew this at some point. Other ones, I'm like, they're not necessarily monsters that you guys are going to fight, but they're maybe monsters I'm going to put in the world to be like, just to be like, not have you go to a region and be like, yes, bears live in this forest. I want to be the guy who's like, oh, well, this region's actually known for owl bears, and you guys are like, what's an owl bear? And I'm like, well, it's an owl and a bear. But like, I want to be able to have a world that seems fantastical at the get go. It doesn't necessarily have to be like everyone rides horses and they have cows on their farm and they do, and they chickens lay eggs. It's like, well, what if they had cockatrices who lay eggs on some farms?
You did that.
How would that work?
You did that really well with the drow, actually, when we went to Endlicon and the and the inverted city and all that. Like I distinctly remember you being like, these drow raise on, it was some kind of a giant insect.
They're cave fishers.
Cave fishers, that was it. And you were like, they use they're bit like they use the skin to make leather and like all these other things. And like some of their weapons are made out of like bone fragments of the thing and stuff like that.
Yeah, so like that's probably a good example, because like I don't always want to put a monster in because I'm like, you'll definitely fight this. Sometimes I put the monster in because I'm like, this is an interesting world building thing. And it's actually, if you look at Volo's guide, cave fishers are super interesting because they excrete, so they can shoot webs at you and like wrap you up. So they excrete that as like, and then they also have a thing where it says, I believe, in their stat block that their blood is flammable. So like I took them and I was like, these are kind of interesting. They live underground. What would it look like? It was specifically a gnomish / elvish town called Lanterstad, and they farm them. They're giant, vicious insects with pinchers and claws and stuff, but they farm them here. And I'm like, what do they get if they farm them? Like, and I kind of thought like Native Americans using all parts of the buffalo kind of situation. So I'm like, what do? Okay, well, you eat the meat. Obviously, that's fair enough. You can eat the meat of these things. The web they can spin could be gathered to make silk. So you can make clothes or rope or anything out of that. Great. They have a kind of chitinous outer thing you could use to make armor pieces, or like you said, it could be made into leather as well if it was softer parts of the creature. They have flammable blood, so you could like distill that into lantern oil. And what else was there? I think that was about it, but that was kind of it. I'm like, there's like 4 or 5 like things you can do just from this one animal if you just breed them in a pen, and then the city. A lot of the cities, it's not its industry, so to speak. It was very much like, it was a highly industrial city, so they would still use metal and stuff, obviously. But it was. I just thought they were super interesting when I was reading through it, and I'm like, I could totally build a whole economy around this creature because it has so many interesting, useful parts.
No, it was.
That was one I did, and I was quite proud of that one, to be honest.
No, I like, personally speaking, like really enjoy. I always enjoy when there's like well thought out world building in something, and it's really good. And so like that, I really enjoyed that, the whole thing where like yeah, of course they have like lots of silk stuff because they have stuff that easily produces silk, and then they like all this other kind of stuff that just like naturally logically built on top of each other to make the original idea feel even more fleshed out and better. Better is not a great word to use there. Jesus, you can tell I'm tired today. More better. Make it more better.
More better.
You there, child.
Yeah,
Make it more better, please.
I know I don't know if I got into it too much with you guys, but even when I was like designing Lanterstad as a place, I knew what kinds of clothes people would be wearing and stuff like that, and what the colors of those clothes were based on the environment they're in. I'm like, you can harvest insects and occasionally other creepy underdark creatures, and I'm like, a lot of them would be pale, like you know when you see like fish that live in deep waters or creatures that live underground, they don't have any coloration to them. Some of them is just white.
The crawlers from The Descent.
Exactly. Not to be mixed up with The Cave, which is basically the same movie.
Or axolotls, which are much nicer.
Exactly, yeah. And they are,
Stop.
and like so, like
Sorry, stop. Yeah. Apparently, the word axolotl sets off my Amazon product that I have down there.
It happened again.
It nearly went across the room. It nearly went across the room there. Go, pause the video just there, and you will see murder in my eyes along with the tiredness.
Yeah. So yeah, sometimes I'll do that. I'll be like, I'll like I said, that's an easy one because when you just read the lore about it, it's like that's super interesting. Again, like maybe you think in a certain regions they don't farm chickens, they farm cockatrices or for whatever reason. Maybe instead of cows, they have giant beetles. Maybe they're in the desert and there's giant beetles or something that live in the desert. Like you could just like, I have the bugalo. I know. Are you thinking of the bugalo from Futurama?
In one, you got it. Yeah, you said that, and immediately I envisioned like Amy and her.
I knew exactly what you were thinking. I knew it. But yeah, no, like maybe it's something like that. So a couple of ones I actually have here.
Ooh.
I'll just read out a couple of them. I had an idea for an Anteater. It says Anteater bat combo, but I don't know why it says bat.
A Banteater.
A Banteater. It eats all the bant. But I have a bracket like the shear shoe from Avatar.
Yes, I love those.
Which is just that's a great, and like in a world like Avatar where everything is something, it's just two animals put together like a chicken cow or a polar bear dog. Like this is one of the few genuinely unique animals, and it's called a shear shoe, which I think about it in Chinese might mean something.
Quite possibly.
They were good in their world building with using fairly accurate Chinese to name certain places and stuff. Like Ba Sing Se, I think literally means like the city that can't be entered or something similar. That it means what it is, which is quite cool.
I love that.
So I thought that one could be quite cool. I thought like a tapir mount, tapirs. I think they're great. Tapirs are awesome. I thought like if they were bigger and like could they be used as mounts by full size people and stuff like that. So that's quite cool. I thought of a displacer beast that would have like a desert version of a displacer beast. Ooh. So it would look more like some sort of desert cat instead of a panther, and then it would have its tentacles would more resemble like snake skin, almost like rattlesnakes, and maybe they actually make the rattlesnake sound when they move. That was more of an environmental thing. I'd probably I'd use a regular displacer beast block. But,
that'd be really cool if that's how it activated its like displacement ability, where like the tentacles lift up and they go shh, and then that vibration starts the vibration of the body, and that shit.
Yeah.
You really
could even like make their tentacle attacks like slightly poisonous, just to add extra dice of poison damage and make them like sting you with it.
Change it to bludgeoning damage because you're smacking.
There's a thing called I'm gonna mispronounce this. Is it a Nemertea Worm? They're like I was gonna say don't look them up. They're awful. They're terrible. But I thought they'd make a fantastic monster. They live in the ocean floor. And they have this their muscle on their jaws like incredibly strong. So a fish will come by and they'll grab the fish and they'll cling to it for dear life and they'll rip it down, they'll eat it. And like their whole body is just one big muscle. So they'll just constrict and stuff. They're quite gross. If I'm not mistaken, they might also be one of those fish that secrete a slime on them. So that you can't touch them because it feels numbing or feels like your hand's kind of getting paralyzed. I had one idea for...
Have you ever heard of a Mongolian death worm?
No.
This is a creature that supposedly exists in the Gobi Desert. It's like a I think it's about like a 2 foot long worm that has like I think it's like incredibly poisonous, incredibly aggressive, and it can shoot lightning at you. It's like a cryptid in Mongolia.
I'm looking at it here. Yeah, madness. Um, I've I've two more. One is just a puppet master spellcaster type, just loads of controlling spells, kind of like Sasori in Naruto.
Yeah.
Doesn't always have to be monsters. Can be a person as well.
Most of my
And
homebrew
then
monsters are people.
I have a mud dragon, which I was just gonna tweak a dragon turtle into a snapping turtle for a swamp region.
Ooh, would you give it
And he would
Earthblight?
just I'd probably give it like some earth spells it can do, like shift earth and maybe like earth. What's the grasp, the claw that can grab you and hold you in place
That's
with.
the thing Caleb always cast in season 2. The
Well,
cat.
he had the cat's ball one, but there's another one. Maximilian's earth and grasp. That's it. And then I'll also Bombardier Beetles, which are beetles that quite literally they're like little mini artillery beetles. They're really small, but when other creatures like ants swarm them, they literally spit a hot acid that like ignites. So it's like fire and acid. And if you see them in slow motion, they just turn around and they kind of face their rear end towards the person, and it goes like that, and this little jet of acid comes out, and you can see it igniting and wisping up like wisps of smoke come off it because it like ignites with the air or something.
Yeah.
And it can like blind creatures and stuff like that. Even bigger creatures, like if a mouse or a rat tried to eat one of these things, it could blind them. Which I thought were really cool. If you make that a large size creature, you got yourself an awesome fight there, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one from, and surprise, it's from a book I read. In Mistborn, there are they're monsters. They're various monsters, but they are agents of the evil empire called Steel Inquisitors, and they're all capable of using all of the metallic related magic, because there's like I think there's seven. No, there's 10, I think, metals that you can use in Allomancy, and if you can use them all, you're called Mistborn, and all of the Steel Inquisitors are Mistborn. And they're incredibly intimidating because they look like just big, tall, like strongly built people, but they have two metal steel spikes driven through their eye sockets and out the back of their head. And
Right.
they're fully able to see. They're able to sense when other people are using Allomancy, which is the magic system. They're resistant to the magics of Allomancy themselves, and they are way faster, more powerful, and incredibly brutal. Like if a bunch of Steel Inquisitors find you, like there won't be much of you left afterwards. You'll be a stain on the ground basically. And they're really, really terrifying. They're like to the end of the series they remain terrifying. And like I've always really wanted to do a D&D equivalent, because I know there's the Inquisitor, the Mindflayer, the Inquisitor, the Blade, that kind of stuff in there. But I would just there's something particularly in the way they're written in Mistborn. The Steel Inquisitors are so fucking like it's literally like and even the main characters, when one shows up, they're like, oh shit, we need to go now. Like we need to.
There's something to be
like all we can do is hold these off. We need to run. They're like the regenerators in Resi.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. There's a handful of things like that in various movies and franchises, where and this is a bit a kind of a side point, but I think it can be important sometimes to have a monster show up in your campaign, or like you said, like like an Inquisitor, or a person or some sort of creature that is maybe hunting the party or something like that, kind of like Nemesis style, that the party is like cannot beat, but you know they'll you know that at a certain point they'll come back around, and the party will defeat them, but because they've had to run away every time, it keeps that creature terrifying, you know. I'm trying to think of other examples.
We had our own one at the start of this campaign with the
I basically did like a Mr. X with a flesh golem situation.
It worked really
which was
well.
good though.
It worked really well.
Actually worked better than I thought it was going to work, because I thought he was. I brought this up before. I put him up against you at like level 1. You were level 1, because he started out in the town and it was zombies everywhere. And he was literally a Mr. X clone. And you tried to fight him, and the damage was nothing. and you were like, oh crap, we need like better weapons because you know how the game works. And then you didn't see him for a while. I think the next time you fought him, uh, you tried fighting him then when you had, but they, again, just didn't. Your weapons weren't good enough. I think you had no weapons the first time, so you ran.
Yeah.
Then the second time you had weapons and they didn't work because they weren't magical. And then the third time you fought him, you had silvered your weapons, and you're like, "We got this." Now I just cursed. Damn it! We're 40 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bleep that as well at the 40-minute mark. Haha, sorry, I gotta take note of this stuff because that's what YouTube makes me do now.
I know.
But yeah, and then the third time you're like, okay, we got this guy. Now we got silvered weapons. Let's go. You ran up. I was like, roll for attack. Obviously hit him because he got super low armor class. I'm like, you drive your spear into his chest. It only goes like half an inch in. He bats it away, no damage. And you were like, what? And the thing is, I realized that as you were starting the fight. I thought, cool, this will be a good encounter now. And I realized as I started the fight, I did a quick skim through his stat block again. And obviously I didn't read it correctly before. And I'm like, oh, it's not resistant, it's immunity. He's immune to non-magical damage that isn't adamantine. So then I was like, oh, this has got way more interesting. And you guys had a really, really narrow escape.
Yeah, we just had to run.
Yeah, to run. And then the next time you fought him, though, he did have magical weapons, and you were around to go then, and then he actually ended up killing him. So I feel like it was so earned because you weren't equipped to fight him at the time. And I feel like that's kind of thing. Like, I mean, it can be really cool. It says a lot when you can keep a type of monster still very scary right up until the very end. I'm trying to think, like, there's definitely games and stuff like that, because games do this sometimes where, like, there's different monster types or bad guy types you fight in the game, and maybe at first you're fighting just regular, like, soldiers, and they've got, like, swords and shields, and they're just regular guys, but maybe it's, like, the honor guard show up at one point, and the first time you meet them in the game, you just don't have the tools to beat them. There's no conceivable way, so you run. And the next time you fight them, you only narrowly escape, because you fight them and you're getting a little bit of somewhere, but, like, then... you don't. And games do the opposite as well, where like they'll show you a guy is like, this is a knight, this is an inquisitor knight, and he's deadly, and you'll fight one of them, and you only because your power level that at like 2 hours into the game, you're only just about able to defeat this guy. But then by the last level, you walk into a room and there's 4 of them, and you're like, I got this.
Yeah, Souls games do that a lot. Where like in Dark Souls 1. One of the first, the first 2 demons you encounter are one with a bullhead called the Taurus demon, and then another with a goat head called the Capra demon. And like once you eventually get into an area in later game Dark Souls 1 called Izalith, which is the birthplace of chaos magic, and demons come from chaos. So like when you get in there, there's all lava and fire everywhere, and like one of the first places you run into, you see. I'm not even like I think the Capra demon is like a notorious demon in Dark Souls because the boss arena you fight him in is terrible. It's like a really small confined area, and there's him. Right. He's got 2 big machetes and he's got like a leap attack, and even just a regular machete hits are hard. But he's also got 2 goddamn dogs with him. So you literally walk through the fog door and he jumps at you with the 2 machetes, and then 2 dogs jump at you at the same time. So you have to desperately try to roll out of the way and get around and kind of work it away. And it's a really tense fight and really annoying. Then you get to the demon runes in Lost Izalith, and there are 8 of them on a bridge. No dogs, but 8 Capra demons. And I remember just seeing that and I was like, I just turned around and went back. I just left.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, and again, like, I think that can sometimes be a mistake. Like, maybe more so, but you want a monster that the party is fighting to feel like it's a challenge, like it's a monster, and they're definitely the heroes. They should probably still win if the dice are on their side, but you also want it to be a case of like, this is not going to be easy, it should be earned. So they should, and again, like introducing the monster a couple times, or even like you don't even have to like have them fight it and lose a couple times. Introduce the monster, do a Darth Vader on it from Rogue One. Just have him in that corridor, show him hacking down, 20 of the honor guards who are meant to be guarding the king of this kingdom, and he goes through them like butter, and you're just like, wow, that guy's deadly. Let's get out of here. And then the next time you see him, there's going to be that tension because you're like, we saw this guy take down 20 honor guards, and now 4 of us have to go up against him. Like it makes for such a it makes for such a good. And again, that plays into what I said earlier about your players, whether they're experienced players or new players. If they don't know what the stat block of the monster even looks like or what abilities they have, brilliant.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
and I think as well, it's a really good way. I think Homebrew, one of the benefits of it is you basically auto counter metagaming.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
it's not something, thankfully, that I've had to deal with super often, but in the previous incarnation of my party, I remember early on in the game, I think I put them up against I'd finished a session with like a wyvern flying down from the clouds and engaging them, and I was like, we'll pick up next week with the wyvern fight. And then we came back next week, and like literally before I had the map put out and the minis put out, one of the players that no longer plays in my party was like, Jesus man, we looked the wyvern up there, and he's got a really nasty tail attack, doesn't he? And I was like,
But they were, to be fair, they weren't like very experienced players.
yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
That's why I got over it pretty quickly. But I just kind of I explained, I was like, look guys, that's kind of not cool. Please don't do that anymore. But even regardless, so my guys don't really do that anymore. But even regardless, sometimes I will just homebrew just to kind of like say throw a curveball, because it's fun watching people both panic and think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, and again, like I know that like you run games, Gavin's run games. I know that Dan and Mike are both big fans, so they recognize a lot of monsters.
Mike's ran games as well.
Does Mike run a game as well?
Mike's ran 4 or 5 one shots. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I know he's running a lot. Sorry, I thought he was running a campaign
My
at the moment
yeah.
or something.
No, sorry. In terms of like a long-term campaign, yeah, me and Gavin, you were the only 3.
Yeah, yeah. That something very similar happened when we were in Gavin's game. Because I do a thing whenever I play D&D now, because I have to, where before I even start playing, I'll be like, okay, so here's the deal. I know this game really well. That's not me bragging. I just need you to know that. Yeah. So occasionally you might do something, or someone in the party might say, I have this ability, and I might know that they're wrong. Do you want me just to shut up? And I'll say nothing if you want me to say nothing, but I just leave it lie. Or would you rather I pointed out things so that people, how the rule works? And there's a benefit to it sometimes, where someone might be like, oh, I get an extra D6. And I could be like, you actually get 2 extra D6. There's benefits to it as well.
That's like the good version of being a rules lawyer. It's like,
exactly,
you only correct people when they're making a mistake that will make them weaker than they should be, rather than you're like, DM, excuse me, that's not exactly how it's written.
Yeah, and I said it to him about just very cleanly. Because again, I'll happily go either way. I just want to know what people would prefer in this case. And everyone thankfully was like, if you see something that's wrong, call it out. Because at the time, Gavin was pretty new to DMing as well. So he's like, if I'm doing something or someone's doing something, feel free to just shout it out, because we'll all kind of be on the same page. And I'm like, that's cool, grand. Oh, yeah. And I also said, like, this is always on the table. If at any point you want me to stop, say so, and I will stop as well.
Yeah, like there's a reason
something similar.
The upcoming one shot I'm running that I asked you and Gav to be a part of it, because I have people. I'm the other aside from Tara as well. Like the other half of the party are all either very very new to D&D or haven't played at all. So I was like,
yeah,
we get experienced people in who can know more about other stuff that I might not, because like I know the classes I DM for extremely well now. The other stuff not so much, because it's not you don't get as much practice.
That's actually another good golden tip, is if you're ever planning on being the DM for the first time or running a one shot for the first time, and have one of the players, either maybe the DM from the game you play in, or have another player who does play regularly join in, even if it's only for the first few sessions of a campaign, because they're your ringer, they're your like that was you for me when I started playing. You had played loads, everyone else had not played at all, and sometimes when the question needed to be asked, I didn't need to address every single person. They could turn to you and be like, Martin, how does this thing here work? And you could explain it to them as well. Always have a ringer in your game, because they're like a secondary DM when you need it. Like
Mike is my ringer in my D&D campaign, particularly for my sorcerer, because he's played 20 levels of sorcerer.
Because he's played 20 levels of sorcerer.
Actually, 20 levels of the exact same sorcerer down to their draconic lineage.
Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay, that's
both,
cool.
Both draconic lineage.
There's one thing I wanted to say there as well, and after forgetting. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I said a similar thing with the looking up of monsters happened in Gavin's game, and we were sitting there and we were playing. I can't even remember what the fight was, what the monster was. It was like
it wasn't that griffin that killed Ollie, was it?
No, he put us up against 2 griffins at like level 2, or level 1 or 2. Like now, to be fair, there was like 6 or 7 of us.
Okay.
But like that was a tough fight. Like a lot of people got downed in that fight. I got the winning kill, just saying. But what was it? I keep losing track of. Oh yeah. So whatever fight was happening, and we're all sitting around, and Gavin's obviously rolling for the monster, and we're in the middle of the fight, and we're like, wow, this thing's hitting us really hard. And then on the opposite side of the room, Irene just pulled out. She's like, "Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it here. I look like this thing's really good." And everyone's like, and like no one else saw a problem because everyone, bar me and Gav, are new players. And Gav's like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "Oh, just look up the monster we're fighting." And he's like, "You can't do that though." And she's like, "Why not?" He's like, "It's kind of meant to be." Like, she didn't get the concept of metagaming at all, which is perfectly fine. And he was like, "No, it's kind of meant to be a secret, and you're not meant to know how many hit points it has and stuff like that, because then it's a surprise when you finally kill it or whatever." And she was like, oh, my bad. And she closed it then. She was fine. Yeah. But like, again, sometimes people don't understand that part. I would never fault a new player for that, because again, particularly when there's no malice in it. If a player, like if you did what happened in your situation, and like the people who looked it up with the intent of, I know everything about it now so I can avoid all this stuff, that's wrong, and that's kind of cheating, as far as, you know, it's not fair. And it takes the fun out of it for you as well. But if someone looks it up genuinely curious, like, ooh, I wonder what that looks like, and then you see the art and the stat block is there, so you just happen to read the stat block, like, I would never fault anyone for that if they're a new player.
Yeah, and like as well, like if it's like if your player's a DM as well, like they're just gonna know. You can't avoid it. Like so you'll always get crossover. Conor, do you have? I know because I know we talked a lot about Giverell last week. So I'd imagine he may show up. But do you have a particular homebrew monster out of either campaign that you've now ran that you really really liked? That you think is like one of your best efforts at world building? Not world building, at Homebrew Monsters.
Homebrew Monsters, yeah. I've done it. I think I've done more this campaign that were more coherent. Last campaign I had a couple, but I mostly just pulled them from books and stuff that are really obscure. So last campaign, the one that probably stands out to me most would be maybe when you guys fought Garroth.
Yeah.
Who was the high elf impersonating a demon, fallen paladin kind of guy. He was quite cool. Also the Clockwork Man, who was the big end boss of that entire campaign. Because by the time you guys were level 20, he was so powerful. I think I gave him like 7 legendary actions and like 5 legendary resistances, and he had 2 actions every turn as standard, and he was able to cast 2 spells. I broke all the rules because I'm like, I need to make something powerful enough.
To be fair, he was the Primus. Like he was the Primus of
Mechanus.
Thank you.
And the thing is, you fought him and 2 Maruts, who are those big construct Modron guys who just hit you. You don't even have to roll; they guaranteed hit if they come up to your line, and he still won. So like, but it was a tough fight because you still won. And I was not pulling my punches at that point. I feeble-minded Mike within 2 turns of the game starting.
I think in that fight you feeble-minded both Mike and Tara.
I think I feeble-minded Tara as well. Yeah. Luckily, she was a monk and she was just really good at punching things. That's all she needed. Mike had a ton of spells he couldn't cast, but he did have a magic item that I ruled he would be able to activate, which allows him to turn into a dragon. So I was like, okay, you're really dumb, but you are a dragon. So we had a few last campaign, but again, I feel like some of the stuff I came up with last campaign was not as ingrained in the lore of my world. I was kind of just making monsters for the sake of them sometimes, and lots of times I was just pulling them from Tome of Beasts, Creature Codex, stuff like that. The ones I have now are ones I like quite a bit more because again, I feel like they're entrenched in the lore of my world. You guys, we talked a while ago about you guys going into the Underdark and stuff like that. Some enemies you faced regularly there were my cursed elves I call Balgwyn. So that's Balgwyn. So in my world, Gwyn is the Elvish word for elf, and Bal basically means like cursed. It's like Baal. It's like you're cursed, you're cast down. And they're basically elves who dabbled in the occult, and then as a result got cursed. And now they're my earth elves are basically like drow, but they're kind of like charcoal gray instead of like purple. and they do still live underground, and they're also not all inherently evil. Let's get that out there, because I don't like the whole but Drow are always like evil and they always worship the Lord. Stop. Um,
Dritz
so yeah,
Jordan,
so
maybe.
Dritz, yeah, Dritz. Except that one guy, Dritz, because he has a book. He's the only exception to the rule. He has books. He's multiple books.
He's a lot of books.
And he appears in a lot of games as well. But yeah, so the Belgran are my version of that. But I wanted to see a new spin on dark elves that wasn't spiders and lulth, and they're all evil slavers. So the Belgran are just cursed. They're made to look like bats. Their eyes are kind of like they have no eyes. They're kind of like the skin is like grown over them, so they can't see. They make like clicking sounds like clickers in The Last of Us to like use echolocation. They have those bat like noses where they have like the ribbed kind of like bits of flesh and stuff that come down. So they look quite monstrous. And again, this is very cave, or what was the other one?
The Descent.
The Descent. In terms of how the creatures kind of work, they kind of behave a little bit like that. They are intelligent. And I even came up with some interesting ideas about how they can still, because dark elves or earth elves in my world are really, really good metallurgists.
Yeah.
And they can still craft metal, because when they hit an anvil, it makes such a loud noise that all the echolocation gives them perfect vision on what they're doing. So they can still craft metallic armor and instruments like to a master level, despite them being blind when they're trying to do it. So yeah, so they're the Belgran. I wanted something that wasn't typical Drow for my Underdark, because I did a big Drow arc in campaign 1, and 3 out of 4 you guys were there for that. I'd like to give you something different to kind of work with. So I have like 3 stat blocks for them. I have a regular Belgran. I kind of used the Troglodyte stat block as a starting point, but then I looked at the very base Drow one as well, and I kind of mixed and matched a little bit. They have blindside out to 60 feet. They speak Elvish and Undercommon. They have the Fey ancestry. They also have stone camouflage, which I think I kept from the Troglodytes. I think they have that. They have a climbing speed naturally, so they can climb. And then they have like keen hearing and smell, because again they're blind, but they have really, really good smell and really good hearing ability. And I have 3 stat blocks for them. One is called just Balgwin, which is like your commoner. They just have daggers and they're quite weak, but they'd be good for like a level 1 encounter. I have Balgran warriors. They do wear like studded leather. They have a spear that they carry. They have a thing called a howling blowgun, which I was really proud of. Because blowguns never get used, but in this case, they carry blowguns with them, and because they have like this whole theme of like echolocation and shouting or clicking to whatever to make things visible to them, they have these blowguns where they can blow through it. And it does the regular 4 piercing damage that a dart would, but rather than lace it with poison or anything like that, it does 2d8 thunder damage as well, because they do like a kind of almost like a shout kind of through it, it's like a sonic blast that propels the dart, and then so they have that, and then I have what I call a Balgran Kashrati, which
I remember him.
They wear full half plate. They carry huge mauls. They also have the blowgun. They're kind of like almost like knights or paladins of this thing. And also their maul, they can channel. Did I include that? I almost certainly did.
No, you did, because I remember getting hit by it.
Yeah, I think I have it somewhere. Oh, here we go. Howling Strike. Once per turn, when a Balgran Kashrati hits with a melee attack, it deals an extra 4d6 thunder damage on the target. So they can channel that sonic bat-themed energy into a strike with their maul and hit really, really hard. They're quite tough. But again, so I had like a whole little ecosystem of Balgwin, and I had other ideas for like Balgwin priestesses that could do some magic and a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, so they're probably one of my favorite ones I've done for this campaign, because there's a whole lore and a background behind them, and I love Drow, but I also feel like Drow can be. If I was to ever playing a campaign and someone's like, "Oh, you're going to the Underdark have some Drow," I'd be like, "Yeah, let's go." But at the same time, I like taking a new spin on Underdark elves that isn't spiders, lult, and enslaving people to whatever,
Yeah, no, they were really awesome. They were really fun. I do really like that idea of like the subterranean elf that just like has completely evolved to exist in the dark, like no need for eyes. They hunt everything by echolocation.
Yeah.
Like it's a really
Actually, the Falmer in Skyrim, they're quite similar to that as well. Yeah.
no really cool, like really cool. They're like I love that you went for like the multiple tier approach as well. And like here's your base Baldwin, here's your Baldwin warrior, and these are like royal guards, like or whatever. Or
Pretty much,
guards,
yeah. Temple guards, royal guards, something like that. They would be they'd be zealous in their approach, and like again, they still kind of worship the occult. There's still some of them that have like demonic powers as well. That because it was this bat-looking demon prince is the one that they made a pact with, and then they kind of messed up on that, and that's why they're all cursed. Not all dark elves are, but the ones who dabbled in the occult are the ones who were cursed to become Baldwin.
That's sick. It's really awesome. Yeah, I think for my own experience, I haven't, like I said, I haven't made a whole ton, but there are thankfully some really awesome people out there who have done some really good homebrew versions of most of the bosses from like the Dark Souls games, and a few of just the more interesting creatures as well. I actually put you and a couple people up against them. We've talked about it before, but in a one shot I ran, I put you up against. It was a monster called Queelag, who is a boss from Dark Souls. It's basically like a
Spider lady.
Yeah, the upper half is a woman with a flaming sword, and then lower half is a giant lava spider that like vomits lava and it can do like an AoE fire burst and all this stuff. And as you find out, vulnerable to lightning.
One of my better moves, where I hit her with. What did I do? I think I was playing Eldritch Knight.
You absorbed
and I hit her,
and then used that to add lightning to your next attack and fucked her up.
Well, I think what I did was I hit her with a shocking grasp, up close, and then you kind of let it like that she has vulnerability, and I was like, oh, okay, that was my action. I still have a bonus action, and I have an action surge, so I was like, cool, and I've only casted cantrip so far this turn. So then and also because I hit her with shocking grasp, she can't take reactions until the start of her next turn, I think. So I was like, oh, okay, a bonus action, I'll hit her again with a sword. Then I'll use I'll move away. I don't need to disengage because she can't take reactions. I'll get a distance away. I cast Chromatic Orb with lightning damage at my highest level, which I think was like third or fourth. And then I'm like, cool, and I hit her with this. So all in one move, I discovered what her weakness was. I backed away while she was still being like shocked or whatever. And then I hit her with a really heavy shock attack. One of my proudest moments in D&D, just because the action economy fits so well in that moment.
No, it was really awesome. But she's really fun, and like people have done like you can, if you just look up like Dark Souls D&D stat blocks, you will see just like a plethora of really awesome, because like one, you can dislike the Souls games as much as you want, and in terms of like how they actually play, but you cannot argue with their art style and their creature design. And oh my god, like they've just I'm very tempted to just go out there and grab a few higher level ones for maybe just not even boss fights, just like hard level fights in like maybe like mid tier levels, because some of them are just so cool. Like the Queelag one is really amazing. I know that there are. Why can I literally not think of any bosses from Dark Souls right now? I know they've one from like Dark Souls 2, which is the Rotten, which is this huge like Lord of the Undead that has a giant meat cleaver, and his whole body is made up of like mashed up together corpses that are just like stuck together, so there's like arms and limbs and heads sticking out of everywhere, and like you can see like it originally started out as a bunch of undead in a cage, and then I think it got like a Lord soul and empowered it and mutated it, so like its head, you can see the remnants of the original cage it was in actually make up the shape of the skull, and it looks like basically it looks like the stuff that was stuck in the cage just like grew rapidly and expanded out from underneath it and like turned into this big horrific like mishmash of corpses.
That reminds me of the Rat King and in The Last of Us Part 2.
Oh, I've seen that. Yeah.
Oh man, that whole sequence was like I was just like, you've gone too far, Naughty Dog, go back. Because the first time you encounter that thing is like you're just not ready for it. You're like for everything, you're like, oh, it's probably just another bloater. Nope, not even close. It's like I'd happily face 3 or 4 bloaters other than this thing. It's awful. I'm sorry, I got distracted because I was looking for. You mentioned finding out the Dark Souls monsters online. There is I think it's called the Book of Beautiful Horrors. I came across this thing years ago, right? And people have been adding to it since. And it's basically got a ton of monsters, a lot of which are from The Witcher 3, like if the bestiary from all the different Witcher monsters. There is some. When I said there's Witchers, there might be a couple Dark Souls, there might be a couple Skyrim things in there as well. But like, just they're really well thought out, good stat blocks. Like they're not, none of them are like kind of thrown together or poor quality. And the art is good. It's laid out like a D&D book with the kind of like
Cool.
parchment back and everything to it, and it's all laid out like as if someone was a professional printer of books and trying to make it fit. There's some cool Celtic warrior stat blocks towards the end. There's just a rake of really, really interesting stuff. There's definitely like, there is definitely Skyrim stuff because there's Spriggans from Skyrim in it, and a couple different types of Spriggan.
I think you might have put up against a Spriggan in campaign 1, actually.
Actually, either that or I put you up against a Leshen.
That was it. You put us up against a Leshen.
That was from the book of Beautiful Horrors. That was one of the stat blocks in it. Honestly, it's. I'll try to see if I can find out where I got it from. I'm not seeing it on my drive at the moment, but.
Do you want to know how I know for sure it was a Leshen? Because I can still, because do you know the way so for folks who might not know, I take a lot of notes in our D&D game. I'm the notes guy, and to like refresh my memory. So if I'm looking for something, I'll always do like pun titles for the session, which kind of indicate what the session's about. And that session, the title was A Lesson Learned.
A Lesson Learned, nice. So that was one I've used a couple over the past couple of years. It's a great, if you look it up online, the Book of Beautiful Horrors. It's not all horrific monsters. I think it started off as specifically as a Witcher 3 thing for D&D that someone just did themselves, but they added a catalog of way more monsters. It's a definitely really cool homebrew resource if you're looking for some Witcher, Skyrim stuff or whatever. I
must look again because there's some enemies in Bloodborne that I actually would really enjoy putting into my D&D game, even as someone who hates snakes. And it's an area of Bloodborne I absolutely despise because it is a swamp filled with snakes and people who turn into snakes. But it, like, when you see the enemy, it just looks like a kind of a tall, lean kind of villager type guy with a big axe, like a kind of, it looks like a big bearded axe in one hand that he kind of like drags behind him in a torch. Very like Hammer horror film kind of our villager kind of thing. But kind of
Resident Evil. There's a couple of guys in some of the villages in 4, with the big hatchet,
yeah, very like them. But they're so like when you get up to them, if you hit them, I think if you hit them once, or you can hit them once or twice if you catch them unawares. But if you run up to them and they spot you, they just go like, and then they like start like holding their head and be like, and then like their head like explodes, and like I want to say like 8 giant like boa constrictor snake heads come out of the neck stump. And so you have to deal with it. Still has the big axe and the torch, and it like slashes at you with both. But then when you get in, all of those snake heads can move and attack independently. So like when you get in, it's like it's a humanoid body with a mini Hydra head. Is the best way I can describe it. And
sorry, go on.
Yeah, it was just the first time. Yeah. Just the first time I came across that, visceral would be the way to describe my reaction to that.
Martin ain't a fan of snakes, folks. He's Indiana Jones. He don't like them snakes, and I've used that against him multiple times.
I can appreciate that.
I'm sorry. Is it still sorry if I know I'm going to do it again?
If it actually really really bothered me, you'd have to say sorry, but in the way that, like, I don't like it and I'm gonna fucking like that's fine.
It's all in good fun. You talking about all the snakes bursting out of his head. All I thought about was that scene in The Simpsons where it's whacking day, and the music teacher's sitting on a bench, and he's like, "Oh, a bug," and he flicks it off his shoulder, and a wave of snakes comes over him.
Oh yes, that's amazing. That's fucking. Oh, that's so amazing. Conor, I have something fun. I told you this before we started recording, but. So, the thing everyone warns you about with homebrew, right, and it's normally in relation to, like, character options and classes and stuff, is that generally homebrew is hideously unbalanced. Because it's just someone going, that should be in D&D, most of the time without any of the, like, concerns for, like, balance and what already exists in the game, and, a reasonable challenge that, like, the actual...
I feel a rant coming on.
It's not a
Rant.
it's not a rant. It's not a rant. I think
Rein it in.
no. I have a stat block that I think. Oh God, where did it go? Yes, there it is. I have a stat block that I think, not a stat block, but a description of a creature that I think will cause you to go on a rant. So because as part of this, I wanted to see if I could find just something like some hideously badly made homebrew.
Just something that'll, get Connor's blood pressure up.
that, but also like in a chill, like don't do this as like a bad example. Like try a. Yeah.
Can I ask, is this the like flowery descriptive language that comes before the stat block, or is this the actual stat block?
It's neither. It's a post on r/D&D. I was just looking for like overpowered or terrible homebrew, and it's like the title of it is "What is the most broken / overpowered for its claimed CR homebrew monster a DM has ever thrown at you?" And like 4 people in the thread say Banshee, and I'm like,
I was gonna say Shadow.
But neither of them are homebrew.
No, I know, but like that's the joke. It's like what's the most broken thing? Shadow.
Shadow does appear, but this is it's from the perspective of a player who have to fight this thing. And when I read this, I was like, this doesn't sound too bad. Your DM's an idiot. Right. So this is what the post says. The monster that made me want to ask this question is from a one-shot I recently played in. The monster was a dark orb shadow with tentacles that it can use to make attacks. 3 of them around, in fact, at a +7 to hit. The damage was a paltry 1d8 +3, so no problem there for a group of level 8 adventurers. The issue was the 2 saves each hit forced you to make. A constitution save, and, if you had any spell slots, a spell casting ability save, both at DC 15. Failed the second and you lost your highest remaining spell slot. Failed the first and you got a point of exhaustion. I say again, 3 attacks a round. So in a single round of attacks, this thing could ruin you, and in 2 rounds it could straight kill you, HP be damned. On top of that, it had AC 18, resistance to all damage, yes, even magical weapons, a reaction to cause the first attack against it each round to automatically miss, and Misty Step at will, so it ended each turn hovering 30 foot in the air, watching the melee characters shake their impotent, exhausted fists. Our DM sent 6 of these things at us at once, and once the dust had settled and the cleric had been revived, we found that he considered their CR to be 6. Anyway, what have you had to slog your way through for a truly pathetic amount of XP?
That's...
Go.
Yeah. Okay. I think up until the point where you said 3 attacks, things were fine. Orb of writhing tentacles, 3 attacks, D8 +3, +7 a hit. Also, that's actually wrong because if its challenge rating is 6, it shouldn't have a +7. It should have a +6 to hit because the proficiency wouldn't have gone up to +4. It just matches the levels as if you were a player character. If you're level 5, you have a proficiency of 3, so monsters will have a +3 proficiency at level at 5th challenge rating 5. Anyway, so I think up until that point it's mostly fine. Proficiency withstanding.
And these guys are level 8 as well, so yeah.
And they're level 8. A challenge. Okay, I think if you put any normal level like challenge rating 6 monster into a thing and said I have 4 level 8 players, maybe 2 of them might be an appropriate encounter. Maybe 3 if you really want to go for the deadly thing. But I think that will probably be the balance you're looking at. What was it, 6 or 7?
6.
6. 6 of them for a regular, if you pulled from the book, a challenge rating 6 monster, is way overkill. And on top of that, then the fact that and I'm not adverse to breaking the rules occasionally to keep players on their toes, So, but typically speaking, you wouldn't have 2 saving throws on a thing. Maybe you would. Maybe the players can. I can see myself using that in very specific scenarios. Maybe you're trying to avoid being poisoned, and you're also trying to avoid being knocked down by something as well. Yeah. It attacks you with a tentacle. The tentacles are barbed, so you might get poisoned. You might also get knocked back 10 feet. Whatever. That's not a terrible idea. The fact that one of them is a point of exhaustion, makes shadows look like toddlers in cribs, waving their fists at you, because that's insane. It's so much harder to come back from a point of exhaustion because that's what's called a death spiral. Because once you start taking points of exhaustion, you start getting, it becomes harder to stay alive. Um,
And harder to
so
kill
that's
the
that.
thing as well, because all
And you've 6 of these with 3 attacks each. It's 18 attacks around with a +7, which is that's a fairly decent attack stat. With 3 attacks, you're very likely to hit it. What was the second save for?
So the second save was a spellcasting modifier save, and
Oh,
then if
okay.
you failed, you lost your highest level spell slot.
I don't hate the idea.
Yeah, I like that idea on its own.
Yeah, I do. And like, yeah, and I think, and maybe if it does, it regains health because it feeds on magic or something. I think it's quite a cool idea.
That would be a cool one for like an anti-magic kind of character. Like if you would maybe like they have like claws, or like some kind of, like maybe they have like an anti-magic sword, or the anti-magic sword, and they have some special ability where like if they like stab you with the sword, you take the damage, but then you have to make like a con save, and if you fail the con save, it drains your like highest level spell slot, and then that creature gets that many d6 added to its next attack roll.
Or getting health back. I was thinking one or the other, but yeah, absolutely. So I think it's not a terrible idea in concept. When paired with the exhaustion, it's a lot. And again, that it's just a little abnormal to have 2 saving throws, particularly 2 such hefty saving throws.
Yes.
Not to mention that, again, just coming back to it, like 6 of those creatures with like 18 attacks around is an exceptional amount of attacks to be rolling for anyone. You know, with 3 attacks per monster and 6 monsters. This is something that our first DM would have tried to put us up against, and he would have thought it was cool.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we've mentioned him enough on the podcast before, but he's an idiot.
Yeah, no, he.
And I don't care, but I'll say it. I don't give a shit.
The more and more I DM, the more I look back on that first. Like literally, the players were the best thing about that session.
Yeah, absolutely.
But like looking back on it, I'm like, there's so many problems here. This is a house of cards stuck together with fucking sellotape and bubblegum, and I can see it creaking. And like, I'm not saying my world building is perfect either, but it's definitely better than his.
There were so many weeks that we would come in for that, and like at the time I didn't realize. I was just happy to be there, and it seemed like something was always happening. But there's so many weeks when I look back on them now, I'm like, you didn't plan anything this week, and you are making this up as you go along, or he would do this thing where he would stonewall us as well, where we'd be like, can we try this? And he'd be like, the gate is locked. Can we try to scale the wall? There's guards on the wall. And like, he'd do whatever he can to not allow us to do the thing, because he doesn't have beyond the wall prepped. Yeah. And that is so obvious to me now, because I've been on this side of the DM screen for so long. It's so obvious to me when someone doesn't have that kind of stuff done. But sure, look.
Yeah.
It's all in the past.
Yeah, it's all in the past, exactly.
To quote Rafiki, it's in the past.
Yeah. But yeah, I saw that, and it immediately that's what it immediately screamed out to me, was that's someone who has a DM versus player mentality, because I can't see how you could make that and assign it in that number and not go, this, something about this doesn't feel right.
I mean, again, just pull any other. Again, I know I don't advocate necessarily for always using the challenge rating rules for a fight and balancing encounters, because it's not always accurate.
They're very good guideline though.
They're a good guideline. They won't get you the whole way there, but I mean, I think in this case, had this person put any other challenge rating 6 monster from the handbook or the monster manual, and put 6 of them in a fight, they would have found very quickly. I'm going to make an encounter now, just with any challenge rating 6 monster, but I'm going to put it up against you guys who are level 12.
Yeah. For reference, I 1v1 the CR 10 monster on my own.
You did 185 damage in 1 round.
It's good to be luck sometimes.
It's a fun old time.
I also had help. Just to be clear, I had help. Like I had buff spells and stuff.
You did have a bit of help. Okay, so I'm gonna go.
D&D Beyond also doesn't take into account that your players have magic items either.
It doesn't, but I doubt this guy's. Somehow I doubt that this guy's players had 50 magic items each to make up for this.
Like, depending on their party composition, you could say, how much did they say? I don't think he said how much health this thing had. No, where it gets really, really crazy for me, right? Because, so they've +7 to hit, like the 3 attacks around with +7, yeah, like we're saying, the 3 attacks around +7, 1d8 +3. That's not bad. That's grand. I'd actually consider that pretty balanced and probably a fun encounter for someone. Like maybe like 3 of them against a level 8 party, like 3 of those guys without the save effects.
I applaud the person for not, because I feel like you have to give them credit somewhere because they've done everything else wrong. I applaud them for not making those attacks like 2 or 3d8, which would be tempting if you're because clearly they want this monster to be deadly. But I think if you're going with 3 or more attacks on a creature, consider dropping a damage dice or not going heavy on the damage dice as well. Or if your creature only has 2 attacks in a round, give them 3d8 on the attack. Make the attack hit hard, but not a lot of attacks. It balances out. Just so you know as well, for you guys, if I put you up against one Drider, level 6, that's a trivial encounter. 2 of them, easy. 3 of them, hard. 4 of them is deadly for you guys.
Wow, really? Oh yeah, because 6 4 is 24.
Yeah, 4 Driders is deadly for you guys. I mean, they have like 19 armor class and 123 health, and they get 3 attacks around as well. So they're decent. So that's 4 of them would be considered deadly. Now, for you guys with all your magic items and stuff, you probably do quite okay with that one. But if I threw 2 more in on top of that, I think that'd be a very challenging fight for all of you, particularly because like Dan has a broom and flies around the whole time, but these guys have bows and attack 3 times around with those bows. Like they wouldn't be long picking off his health points from a distance, So you're level 12 and you have a lot of magic items and you're quite well built, tough characters. And then if I put you up against 6 Striders, I feel like that would be a really challenging encounter for him to put. I say him. Women can be terrible at D&D too.
Yeah, right. I'm just going to go to the limb here.
Sorry, that was a bad joke.
I got halfway through my sentence before I heard yours. Yeah. Oh God.
Terrible joke. I apologize. No, but what all I'm saying is, whoever this person is, they clearly underestimated the power of what they were putting their party up against. By the sounds of it, they survived the encounter. But I wouldn't be surprised if the DM had to very quickly backtrack and fudge some health points or fudge some die rolls to make sure the party didn't get absolutely massacred by this.
Yeah, I was going to say I reckon there's probably now, because like what we're saying, with the attacks and stuff they've done at the start, it's not like crazy bad, and there are 6 of them, but depending on party composition, if you've if you've a sorcerer or a wizard, I say they have a cleric there, they're level 8, so they have access to some pretty hard hitting spells. It all really depends on how much health each has, right? Because if they don't have that much health and there's 6 of them, there's only so much space 6 of them can occupy, and you can probably take up a lot of that space with a big AoE spell like Fireball, and you might even take out a couple of them with Fireball. Aside from the ridiculousness of the 2 saves you need to make, right? Because I think what they've done here is they've tried to make a creature that will equally affect martial and magical classes, because you get the hit, you tank the hit. If you aren't martial, you don't have to make the spell save thing. I think this is the opposite probably. Actually, if you're a martial character, you probably have an easier time with this. If you were a Gish or anything magical, you're getting hit twice, because if you're martial, you just get exhaustion, and admittedly exhaustion is terrible, and after a certain point you'll have disadvantage on all your attack roll, on all your ability checks and everything. If you're a spellcaster, you're also losing your damage output and your big turn the fight around spells.
That's why it's a death spiral.
Yeah.
Because if the thing that is killing you is also making you less effective at winning, then you're getting further and further away from potentially turning this around and getting a win out of this fight.
The thing I think
exhaustion is something I would write off entirely when it comes to a fight, but not something that every single monster can do 3 times. And again, there's 18 attacks. There's a potential for 18 points of exhaustion to be gained across a team which has 6 players, so potentially 3 points of exhaustion each. And what did it say what the DC was of it?
For the 2, they're both DC 15.
That's pretty high as well. That's
for level 8 too. Level 8, you have a decent enough chance of failing that at level 8, depending on what your stats are. You know?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. No,
Uh,
it's horribly unbalanced.
yeah, I think where it gets really unbalanced is when he runs into more when the player details start to more the stats the creature has. AC 18 and resistance to all damage. It's invulnerable. Like that's what a potion of
See,
invulnerability does. It gives you resistance to all damage.
I never put resistance to all damage on any of my monsters because if you're going to put resistance to all damage on it, just give it twice as much health.
Yeah, and then but that's not even the like. I think where it gets like. See, this is why I think this is a very player versus DM.
Yeah,
Because like the first half down until where you have to make two saves, I think is reasonable. Like you want to challenge your players. You want to, maybe this guy because it's definitely a dude. Maybe this guy wanted to do like meat grinder D&D where everybody dies all the time and you come in with like 10 characters prepped, or maybe they just want to do like a really challenging game where it feels like the players are scraping by the skin of their teeth every time. But like once you get down to here and it's like it is 18 AC, which is better than most monsters in the game. Resistance to all damage, which is stupid. And then it is a reaction that causes the first attack against it each round to auto miss. And it has Misty Step at will.
wait, I missed that part about the reaction it can do.
Yeah.
So once a round, because it has one reaction, it can just automatically decide that the attack did not hit.
Yeah, so the first attack made against it each round, as a reaction, it can just make it auto miss.
So like at 8th level, like none of your martial characters, even if you have fighters, are going to be making more than 2 attacks. So you're automatically halving the action economy for those guys because they're definitely going to miss on their first attack.
Yeah, you're making like a fighter by that level has action surge, so you could burn that to have 4 attacks in the round, but still.
But that's once though.
Once,
and you want to make sure you land those as well, like you know.
Yeah. And like so like better it has better armor than most creatures in the game. It has the best resistance because it's resistant to every player. Characters don't get that. like
Yeah, true.
the goddamn totem barbarian doesn't get that. Like the bear totem.
Even the totem barbarian is not resistant to psychic damage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's too much. Like it's
and
again
Misty Step at will. So, like they were saying there with the Misty Step, it would basically just hover 30 feet in the air, and there's 6 of them. 6.
Yeah, I mean, like you're talking about like there's so much there that like overlaps in terms of badness.
That's 6. So let's say, like, do you know what you're saying about the fighter thing? Like, even if you're a fighter, you attack twice around, your first attack misses, you only have 1 attack around. I just realized there's 6 of these things. That happens 6 times in a round. Your
of your entire party, 6 attacks will be negated every turn,
and that means that can entirely negate like melee spell attacks as well. Inflict wounds, shocking grasp, chill touch, vampiric touch, all those you can just go. Oh, not only does it not hit, but that spell slot is gone now, and I just nabbed your biggest spell slot too.
So you're kind of coming at them from both sides then. See, again, the overlap is crazy because like you're burning a spell slot on a melee hit which will just be negated and you lose the spell slot, and then when it hits you on the next turn, it takes it potentially takes your 3 highest spell slots on the next turn because you're rolling every single time to make sure it doesn't. So your magic users are going to burn through spell slot like there's no tomorrow. Your fighters are either, if they're melee fighters, they might not be able to get to them because they're all hovering in the air because of a Misty Step, and even if they can get to them, 1 of their 2 only attacks will be negated every single turn. The only time they can negate that a little bit is by using your action surge, which will only have once.
And
but even then, like if it, like paladins, rangers, monks, anyone, a monk could potentially get a couple extra hits in, but again, that's terrible design. That's like, awful design.
You can crit this thing, and he can just go. He uses its reaction and the attack misses.
Like again, there's.
It's like a really shitty version of legendary resistance.
Yeah, I like putting in like there's a couple things I put on some monsters to make them a little bit tougher like that. I like when monsters have good action economy. Like when they have bonus actions they can take, when they have actions, when they have reactions. When you guys fought the Knight of the Moon, she had a parry reaction, which gives her a +6 to her AC. Now, that's because she's high enough level that her proficiency bonus is 6, so that's what it negates. But it just does that to a single attack. one attack comes in, and the thing is, like, you could still potentially roll like a 19, get a 27 or something like that, and she wouldn't be able to parry that because it's still too high, you know. So it, like, this still has to be. I don't know. This just very, very much reminds me of our early DMing experiences where we were getting stonewalled an awful lot, and there was times when we were in encounters. I remember we went to like this dwarven city of the dead place, and we
That's
took
where
like
that
a right
campaign
turn.
ended.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, that's where that campaign ended shortly after you left. Yeah.
Oh wow, okay. But I remember we went there and then we like took a right turn down the corridor and into a room, and it was just full of like these giant insects. But they were like, what it felt like, because we were probably about like level 5 or 6. It felt like each of them was like maybe a challenge rating 5 or 6. But there was like 3 or 4 of them coming at us, and they were hitting us hard. And then we just kind of backed away. And then the DM kind of came to us, and he's like, so what do you want to do? And like, we're gonna leave. We don't want to be here. This place is obviously not some place we can go. And I don't know, was that his intention? Like, he didn't want us to go in there because he didn't have it planned. But, which is, again, would be totally within the MO of this person. But the other thing then was like, we didn't feel like we accomplished anything. We went into this place. It was too scary. We left. End of session. Like, and so we just didn't feel like we were. I didn't feel like we were accomplishing stuff for huge swaths of that campaign we played. There was times where I was having great fun. And to his credit, some of those times were due to how that DM prepped it, and the times when he prepped were good. There was times there I was having a genuine great time.
When we had that 3-stage boss fight, even though it was a bit ridiculous, that was still fun.
There was a time where like we divided ourselves up in different parts of the city, because one of us wanted to watch the entrance to town, two of us were staking out a bar, 2 of us went to the docks, and then he was jumping between them, kind of, and the tension was building really, really well. And eventually, like, simultaneously in these 3 places, 3 big things happened, and it was a mad dash for us to all meet up and get out of town. And I remember thinking that was probably the best session, because I just felt like the pacing worked, and like the moving between us was really, really good, because everyone was getting a little bit of spotlight. It was tense. I remember you ran into like the guy who was like your nemesis, and the character who was with you had to be like, Lug, don't do anything. Yeah. We're not equipped to fight him here. And then I remember, like, I was staking out the bar with another guy on a rooftop, and we were kind of like, some shifty looking people just went in there. Should we go in after them? And then as soon as we did, like, it turns out that they were a character we met a while back, and he just reemerged. And then it was a really, really great session. But again, it felt like, there was a couple of good sessions in there, surrounded by weeks and weeks of plot changing, and the DM clearly not necessarily knowing where he wants his campaign to go. He would like literally like he's rewriting it on the fly. Martin, Martin.
Yes, Conor.
That's all the time we have for today. Sorry, I kind of ran over a little bit.
No, that's good. Man, I think that's one of our better episodes we've ever done. I really, really enjoyed that.
I love making monsters, man. It can be. I find it a little bit like time consuming, but I always find it to be worth it. Like I do it on D&D Beyond. I'll pull a stat block from something similar. I'll start fleshing out the monster, how I want them to be and stuff like that, give them all these abilities, make sure they always have bonus actions, reactions, because the players are going to have a ton of different actions they can do. So definitely give all your monsters bonus actions, reactions, legendary resistances, because it balances things out then. Some of the best fights we've had, like you guys fought the Grand Inquisitor Lukasz Devalkios recently. He was on my custom stat blocks, and he has some great stuff he can do. He's some really, really cool. He caught an airship.
Yeah, that was insane.
He caught an airship like Force Unleashed style. He just falling out of the sky.
Yeah, so cool. And he had the Dragon's Wrath weapon as well. That was so cool.
Which has come out like the week of. I was going to give him like something else, and then that came out, and it's like, there's no way I'm not giving this dude this sword.
Yeah, you said you were going to give him a defender, I think you said at the time.
I was going to give him a defender instead, because he's an Inquisitor, but he's kind of Paladin-esque. But then I was like, there's no conceivable way that this book comes out this week and I don't put this sword in the adventure somehow.
Yeah. It did the job. It scared the absolute shit out of us, I can tell you that.
Oh, hits like a truck.
Yeah, it does. Alrighty, if you have any questions, comments, topics we'd like to cover, or tweets you'd like to send to us, you can leave a comment below on YouTube. You can hit us up on Twitter at the Micflayers Twitter account at MicFlayersPod, which is in the bottom right hand corner of the screen here. And yeah, like I said, if you have any topics you'd like us to cover, or even just memes you want to send to us, we always appreciate a good meme. Please do hit us up there. Conor, where can people find you on the internet?
People can find me on the internet at 0.Conor, ZeroPointConor, one N, very important. That's on Twitter. You can find me every Friday here on the Micflayers podcast at 6 p.m. Irish time on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, Breaker, and Radio Republic.
Nicely done. If you want to try and find me on the internet, you can find me on Twitter at So Sorry It's Over, and you can also find me most of the time manning the Micflayers Twitter account, which has been mentioned already. Do give us a shout if you have anything you want to have a chat about. We're always up for a bit of crack. And yeah, mostly you can find me here, as Conor said, every Friday, 6 p.m. Irish time, on a new episode of the Micflayers podcast. So we will see you next week, folks. Have a good one. Bye.
Later, folks.